So I'd like to welcome Stephen Crawford, Parliamentary Assistant to Ontario Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy. Today we'll talk a bit about the Ontario government's focus on the economy. Stephen has been an MPP representing Oakville since 2018. Prior to serving in government, he worked in the financial industry, including serving as a senior executive and senior equity partner of Acuity Funds. I'd like to welcome to the show Stephen Crawford. Thanks for being here, Stephen.
Thanks, my pleasure, Alan. It's great to be here.
Excellent, excellent. And as we spoke about a little earlier, I'd like to kind of have an informal conversation about what's going on in Ontario, business and the economy. And I thought I'd just start off by asking you the question. I noticed that you recently spoke to the Oakville Chamber of Commerce about the economy and creating a positive environment for businesses to flourish. What's your view on the state of business in Ontario? Talking to Dan Kelly at CFIB, he was a guest on the show a few months back. He says that businesses have never really fully recovered since the pandemic or coming out of the pandemic. What's your take? How are businesses doing, in your opinion, right now?
Well, I think overall businesses are actually doing very, very well. Now, he is correct in that there are certain sectors of the economy that have not fully recovered from COVID. I would highlight those as being more in the hospitality and tourist areas. But aside from that, I would say overall businesses are doing very, very well. And we have a shortage, Alan, in Ontario of over 300,000 workers. We need workers here. That's the biggest problem because demand has been so high and employers just can't find enough people to hire. Notwithstanding that, like I mentioned, there are pockets that haven't fully recovered, those specifically being, I would say, more focused on hospitality and tourism. And we've put out supports to help those particular businesses. For example, even in the restaurant sector, which was definitely hit very hard, as we know, through COVID. Recently, in this last year, the government announced that restaurants would be able to purchase alcohol at a 20% discount to what they would pay at the LCBO. So for all in the past, restaurants would pay the same price that you would for a bottle of wine, for example. So they're able to mark up more on some of the wine, which definitely helps their bottom line and helps those businesses. So we're trying to do what we can, but overall, I would say the state of the Ontario economy and businesses is pretty strong.
So is that why you think the Bank of Canada has been so aggressive in raising interest rates? Obviously, they're raising interest rates to combat inflation. What do you think of that and their policy of this aggressive interest rate hikes? And what is government prepared to do to help businesses? Obviously, they have a lot of debt on the books, and when Bank of Canada raising interest rates 7 times this year, that's definitely going to handcuff a lot of these businesses. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And at the end of the day, the inflation that the interest rates is trying to push down was really created as an anomaly coming from COVID. Because with COVID, we had people sitting home for a year, 18 months, and they were saving money. And after COVID and things opened up, demand for basically everything went up so high that there became this imbalance in supply and demand, pushing prices up. Obviously, there were also supply chain issues as a result of COVID. So inflation has been pushed up by these issues. And it's not for me to suggest, what the Bank of Canada does as a government official. I mean, neither federal or provincial government has jurisdiction. The Bank of Canada is independent. But having said that, I think we do need to get inflation under control. There's no doubt about that. I think likely that it'll be a short-term phenomenon, and these rate increases may not sustain into 2023. Now, clearly, they are hurting some businesses in the short term, and they are hurting demand in the short term. And they're certainly, I say the area most affected is probably housing, where it's pushing the cost to borrow to go up. So with that, I think it's having the intended effect. We are seeing a bit of a slowdown, but we don't foresee any dramatic slowdown. We think the underlying fundamentals of the Canadian and particularly the Ontario economy are very, very sound. So we'll withstand a bit of this turbulence, which we're still in the midst of right now, but we think we'll come out very, very strong.
Right. And you mentioned labor, for example, labor shortage, trying to get more workers, et cetera. Brings a question to mind for me because Bank of Canada, Federal Reserve in the US, they're talking about wage inflation. They're talking about, trying to bring down wage inflation. And one of the things that many people are saying is that the unemployment rate will probably have to rise before we start to see a measurable decrease in inflation. But at the same time, as you mentioned, government is trying to hire more, create more jobs, pay people more. So it kind of is a bit of odds with what the central banks are talking about. And so someone like myself, when I hear central banks talk about wage inflation and trying to slow things down, and then I hear the government talk about how you want to create more jobs and pay people more, which is great. How do we balance those two things? They seem to
Yeah.
be at odds with each other. It's very difficult.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, Alan. You're very astute in that, in noticing that. And it's our view again here at the Government of Ontario that we do want to create jobs, and I think that we believe that inflation can come down without a protracted period of higher unemployment. We think actually getting people into the workforce, those that left the workforce for whatever reason after COVID, perhaps people that may typically be retired that may want to get back in the workforce, younger people, students. We think it's great to encourage them into the workforce, and we think that'll have a positive effect. And we don't believe that in itself will drive up inflation. We just need to get this supply demand imbalance sorted out, get the supply chain issues sorted out, which they are. And we believe they more than likely will be in the first half of 2023. So I think the overall outlook, as I mentioned, is still very positive, notwithstanding a little bit of turbulence in the short run, but the fundamentals are strong. We are seeing incredible investment in Ontario that we haven't seen in decades. In the previous 2 decades, over 300,000 manufacturing jobs left Ontario, for example. In fact, the previous government really did not put an emphasis on manufacturing. In fact, entirely it was on service jobs. They felt manufacturing jobs were a thing of the past. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are seeing a manufacturing renaissance in Ontario with automobile manufacturers, battery manufacturers, medical supply chain companies coming back and building further in Ontario, whether it be electric vehicles or others. But the point is, manufacturing is undergoing a renaissance here in Ontario. So we think the outlook underneath this short-term turbulence is very strong.
So it sounds like you're in the soft landing camp, I guess. And so I guess my last question to you is, heading into 2023, we've heard the Bank of Canada talk about the R word, right? A possible recession. It's kind of a 50-50 whether we dip into recession the first 2 quarters of next year. What do you think of that? Do you think a recession is in the cards? And if it is, what is the Ontario government prepared to do to help these businesses weather a possible first half of the year recession?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And, hard to say, obviously, whether there will be a technical recession or not. We know there's turbulence. I think there's a general agreement about that. We have seen a slowdown in demand for many different products, which may not be a bad thing. Again, to get that balance in play, we think that we're in for a bit of turbulence, but we believe that we will, as a government, have a deficit next year, albeit not as large as it has been over the last few years. In fact, we had a budget surplus the last year, which was an unexpected surprise, and that was really again driven by that high post-COVID demand. Now, in terms of what we're doing for individuals to get through a little bit of this turbulent times, a few things we've done are, for example, ODSP, which is people on disability supports. We've put an increase through for 5% on that, and also indexed it to inflation for the first time. That's going to help some of our most vulnerable people here in Ontario. We've also reduced the gas tax for an extension for another year. That's 5.7 cents at the liter. So you've noticed that Ontario gas prices have come down. Now, some of that is, of course, due to the supply and demand and overall prices globally, but the government of Ontario also reducing the tax further cut that. We were also able to remove the tolls on the 412, 418 out in the east part of the GTA, and we've eliminated the license stickers, which is saving a lot of people significant sums of money, both businesses and individuals. So we're trying to help Ontario families weather the short-term turbulence.
That's great. It's always good to hear what government is doing. Sometimes we get a chance to see it on TV and hear it in the news, but it's great to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here, MPP Stephen Crawford, giving us a glimpse as to how government is thinking and a bit of an idea as to what you're expecting in the future. So I want to thank you to coming on again today. Happy holidays. Hope you get a chance to enjoy some holiday time with family and friends. And I wish you all the best, and perhaps we'll chat soon down the road.
Would love to, Alan. All the best to you and for the holidays, and to all your viewers. Have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you so much. Take care.